Hello everyone! Today I am finally doing a walkthrough of Tarot of the Golden Wheel, which I've been waiting for a rather long time. I found out about this deck quite a few years ago when the creator, who is Mila Losenko, she was posting the pictures of this deck on DeviantArt, and back then I hoped that it would get released. And we finally have it, so that's pretty fucking awesome. So anyway, what I thought I would do, because quite a few people who got this deck who are not Slavic or do not, have access to Slavic mythology, wanted to know more about, whether the people in the cards represent somebody in the mythology or in the fairy tales, whatever. So yeah, I thought I would try to make my own version of it and let you know what I think, at least, because the thing with Slavic mythology, and you need to understand that, is that there's no one version that everybody agrees with. There's different versions of the myths depending on the region, on the country these days, obviously, and same with gods and goddesses. They have different names or different functions in different regions of Slavic lands. So obviously what, for example, people in Russia would consider, their agreed upon mythology is completely different here in Poland. Maybe not completely, but it does have significant differences. So I am going to let you know what I see in these cards from a Polish perspective, because I'm a Polish person. I don't know, I'm not very knowledgeable about the Russian versions of the myths, and I try not to incorporate them into my own paganism, into my own understanding of Slavic mythology. So yeah, I guess that's enough of an intro, just so you know where I'm coming from. And if you know different versions, or if you would assign a certain card to a different god or goddess, let me know in the comments, because I would love to know how you see it. I know that people in the Czech Republic see it differently, people in Russia, people in the southern Slavic countries as well. So if you know something that I don't know, please share in the comments, because I'm sure that there are going to be people who are going to be interested in finding that out. So that said, let's get to the cards. If you saw any walkthroughs before this one, you know that it comes in a sturdy box like this, which is pretty nice. Really cool box that you can actually keep the cards in, so I don't have to make another bag. And a book like this, which is also pretty nice. And I do like the descriptions. I haven't read them all, obviously. I got this deck just today, but I did check some of them, and I really like how it's written, so that's pretty cool. And the cards themselves, they are a bit longer than standard tarot. Standard tarot decks are about the size of this card without the title. So if you cut this, that's your regular tarot size. Which, for me personally, they are a tiny bit too long and it's hard to shuffle. Maybe I will try to demonstrate at the end. But anyway, when it comes to the Fool, it's pretty clear in the booklet that the Fool is supposed to represent you, the person who's reading the cards. And you, as the Fool, are going through major arcana first, and experiencing each one of them. And changing through them, and then the same with the minors as well. So yeah, that's the Fool. The Magician, I honestly have no idea if there's a person in Slavic mythology who could be represented by this guy. We certainly do have some, sorcerers, magicians and stuff like that in the fairy tales, but I can't really, I couldn't really recall anybody who would be fairly young, because this guy looks young to me, and would be some kind of a sorcerer. So yeah, no clue who this guy is, if he is anybody at all. And when it comes to the High Priestess, only after the deck came to me, I realized that this is probably the closest that I'm going to get to Morana or Marzanna in this deck. Marzanna, she happens to be my matron goddess. Here I have a depiction from another deck, which is called Rezyroda. So Marzanna, basically, she's a goddess of... nowadays, she's mostly associated with death. So she's a dark goddess, but also, especially here in Poland, she was maybe more important than in other Slavic countries, or at least it looks like that, because there were quite a few cult places dedicated to her, and she seemed to be not only responsible for death, but generally for the cycles of death and rebirth, so the cycles of nature, as well as dreams, vegetation. Yeah, why I think she is in this card is because she's holding this silver key. And she actually, in some versions of the myths, because as I said, they do differ, she is in the possession of the key to open the earth to change the season from the dark half of the year to the light half of the year, and the other way around. And she also has an owl here, which sometimes, I'm sure it's not like historically correct, but sometimes owls are associated with her. I think that's because like syncretism with other mythologies. So yeah, I would say this is Marzanna. Then the next one, the Empress, is Mother Earth, and it even states that in the guidebook. So here's a depiction, which would be Wilgotna Matka Ziemia in Polish, or I don't even know how to read the Cyrillic script, so I'm not going to attempt, but I know some people call her Mat Zemlya or something like that, so I'm just gonna go with that. So this is pretty straightforward. Of course, if you are Slavic Pagan, you could also assign different goddesses to her, because she's like, the mother goddess. So some people would say it's, for example, Mokosha or Mokosh, or Żywia as well, or maybe Lela. Or you even could, in the like wider version of Morana, say that it's also her, but nowadays she's not really associated that much with this kind of archetype. So yeah, I would just stick to Mother Earth. Then we have the Emperor, and when it comes to him, I guess there's also a few versions you could go with. Fuck, I can't speak today. So the first thing that came to my mind was Rod, who is... this is the depiction of Rod. He's basically like the main god of the Pantheon, but before it went through some changes that most pagan pantheons went through. Because, all of these pagan religions start as just pure animism, then they kind of go into the phase where you worship the powers of nature kind of in their form imagined as gods, and that would be the phase where Rod was worshipped, and then another transformation when they, have more of a like complex character, and because of the development of societies and stuff, they're just more complex than just the personification of the forces of nature. So that's when Rod would transform into Swaróg, or in some cases Perun, or in Poland that would be also Jasz. I have Swaróg here as well. And what I think this actually could also be Swaróg, because he has this bird here and here as well. I think it's a falcon or something. I forgot to check, but I know that in some versions of the myth he does actually have some kind of a bird who can transform into a firebird called Rarug. That's the kind of like a phoenix, you could say. You're going to see him in the Ace of Wands, I think. So yeah, could be Swaróg or could be Rod. Then we have the Hierophant, and this guy is pretty much dressed up in those traditional clothes that you would usually see the Slavic pagan priests which are called Żerca. They dress up like this during, you know, celebrations of the Wheel of the Year. So yeah, I think that's just it. And behind him there are some statues of gods. So yeah, that's pretty straightforward. Then the lovers. I can't really figure out like if these people actually represent somebody. So yeah, I didn't manage to really figure this one out. Then we have the Chariot, and with this one I wasn't sure because the god who usually has a chariot in Slavic mythology, but he's not like 100% confirmed in all of the Slavic regions, that would be Horse. I'm going to talk about him later because he's actually a god associated with the moon. So I'm going to talk about him when we talk about the moon. But because this card is very solar in nature, I figured that this could be either Swaróg again, because Swaróg, he's really like the solar god, you know, the blacksmith. But either way, it could be either him or his son, Dadźbóg, who represents the sun. So either this guy or this guy. Or also, because of the depiction, it's kind of, you know, there are similarities, could also be Perun, especially since we don't have any depiction of Perun later on in this deck either, so that could also be nice. Then we have Strength, and I thought that this one probably represents Dziewanna. Dziewanna is kind of like Diana, you could say. She's the goddess of the hunt, of the wilderness. So yeah, that's what I decided to go with for this one. She's also sitting on a bear. Bears are usually associated with Veles, and who's the god of the underworld in Slavic mythology, which we also don't have him in this deck, but I think this is Dziewanna. Then we have the Hermit, and he doesn't look like anybody, but I was consulting this with Magdalena from Wolf of Coins. You all guys know that she's pretty passionate about Slavic mythology, and she has vast knowledge of this topic. And like she was trying to help me figure some of the cards out. We kind of thought that he could actually be a representation of what we call Dziady Proszalne, which is, Dziady is like, you can either say that it's like forefathers or grandfathers, or also like, you know, homeless people who just roam around and, let's say, visit different houses to get something to eat. They would usually be thought to be representations of, or like our ancestors kind of walking the earth in their form, if that makes sense. So usually around, let's say, Samhain, which we also call Dziady, that's when you would especially like often see them or talk about them and let them inside your house if you meet any, etc. I don't think that was the intention behind the card, if that makes sense. Then we have the Wheel of Fortune, and for this one I think this is Dola or Dodola sometimes. Dola is basically a goddess of fate. So you know, you can see those two women here, and one of them has like this golden thread, so a beautiful golden fate of a nice rich life, and this other woman has this like black thread, and she's obviously like you know, poor, unhappy and all of that. So it was believed that, oh yeah, maybe I'm just going to tell you about that later. So yeah, I think this is Dola, which Dola, the word itself, is not only a name of the goddess, but it also literally means your fate. So yeah, that's the Wheel of Fortune. Then we have Justice, and with this one I wasn't sure because this is a strange combination. You have the like this embroidery, which is with birds, so that suggests that this is some kind of a bird goddess, you know, like heavenly goddess. But then you also have you know, like the sun, which doesn't really contradict it, but then you have the like oak leaves and acorns, which doesn't really go that well with her, with this like archetype, I guess. But I figured that she would probably be Łada, and Łada, she's a goddess of, let's just say, balance in general. The word ład in Polish means balance and harmony, something being, you know, equal or balanced generally. So I think that's pretty fitting for justice. Then we have the Hanged Man, and this guy, the only thing that he makes me think about is the fairy tale about Kościej. This is the kind of, you know, sorcerer who cut his own heart out and he hid it somewhere, and therefore because he doesn't have a heart he cannot die, so he's like immortal. And then there is this guy who, like, Kościej has kidnapped some kind of a woman, and this guy wants to save her, so he has to go through some trials, and he finds out that the chest with Kościej's heart is actually at the bottom of a well, so he has to, like, that's just one version of the myths that I read. I think that was actually in maybe Mary Louise von Franz's book, The Shadow and Evil in Fairy Tales, but I'm not sure because I couldn't find it, but that's what I remember. So he has to dive to the bottom of the well or lake or something to retrieve a chest in which there is a rabbit, and in that rabbit there is some kind of a bird, and in that bird there is a golden egg, and he has to like crack it, and that inside that there's the heart of the Kościej, so he destroys it, and then he can defeat him in combat and save that woman. So that's what this makes me think about, but I'm not sure if it's related in any way. Then we have Death, which seems pretty neutral. This is just some kind of an animal skull. And then you have the oak leaves, so a new oak tree growing from the skull. So, you know, the oak tree generally in Slavic mythology is our sacred tree. It is the, you know, the world tree for us. So yeah, I think that's what it represents really, you know, like new growth through, because of death, so the cycles of death and rebirth, but there's no like further Slavic symbolism in this. Then we have Temperance, and this I think is just, and that's also what the guidebook says, what we call Święty Guy, so a sacred grove where you would like go to pray to the gods, basically. Sometimes also do rituals and stuff, because this guy doesn't look like anybody in particular either, so just gonna go with that. Okay, then we have the devil, and the devil shows, here you can see this is Fern, and this is a flower, and this is a very you could say famous Slavic tale of the fern, like the mythical fern flower, which grows somewhere in the forest during the Kupała night, which is like, you know, summer solstice basically. You know, the like mythical version is that if you go into the forest and you search for this mythical flower and you find it, then all of your wishes will come true and all of that stuff. But you know, like, really, if you celebrate Kupałnocka or Noc Kupały or Kupała night, whatever, then you know that this fern flower is just an excuse for people to go to the forest and you know, have sex basically, because Kupała night is very much about sexual openness. It's the festival of the merging of fire and water, so that's, you know, it was usually celebrated through sexual intercourse with whoever you wanted to have sex with, basically. So yeah, that's maybe why it is the devil, because there's definitely lust involved and this sexual energy. So yeah. And then we have the tower, and this doesn't show anything in particular to me other than these buildings are kind of in this Slavic style, I guess, and they are burning, obviously. So yeah, nothing to say about this one. Then we have the star. I think the star is Zorza, which is, you know, a goddess, you know, of the, that basically means the morning star, or like the first dawn or something like that. So yeah, that's pretty much her. Then we have the moon, and yeah, with the moon we have the god Horse, which is supposedly a god of the moon, associated with the moon, and he is usually portrayed as a dog, or with the head of a dog. So I think that's close enough to a wolf as well, because they are like the same kind of family of species, you could say. So yeah, that fits. Then we have the sun, and traditionally you would have Dadźbóg, which I mentioned him earlier. He's the son of Swaróg. He is like literally the sun. So I was kind of surprised that he was not portrayed here. This is definitely Yaryło. He is like the young god of spring, basically. Reborn, you know. So that's the sun. Then we have judgment, and I thought about this one for a while as well. Because, you know, in Slavic fairy tales there's quite a few like tales where you have women who shapeshift into swans, but, you know, they are not like goddesses or anything. And I was thinking that, you know, maybe at some point we did have some kind of a swan goddess, but, you know, we don't know anything about that these days. The only goddess that's sometimes, you know, associated with birds, and I also mentioned her earlier, is Łada. That's the one that I associated with justice. But I guess she could fit here as well, but I don't want to like repeat myself. So yeah, I'm just going to leave her like unassigned. I also thought that Perperuna could kind of a little bit fit in here. She's the female counterpart of Perun. Perun is like the, you know, god of thunder, kind of like Thor. So she's the female version of that. She brings about the storm, rain, you know, this moist nature basically through storms. So that's kind of what it looks like here anyway. But yeah, that's definitely not her, but I just thought that could be an interesting association. And then the world, we have Rodzanice, which sounds kind of similar to, has the same like root as Rod. He's Rod and they are Rodzanice. So they are like the, you could say goddesses, I'm not sure how to classify them exactly, who actually weave the thread of your fate. So I mentioned Dola earlier, but they are actually the ones who come to a newborn child, to their like crib, and they gift the, you know, the fate to the child. So you can see that one of them is like maybe older. I'm not sure if they are like different ages, or maybe just different like, I guess it could be, because you can see there's different like seasons as well. So maybe. But anyway, I think this fits to Rodzanice, so that's what I assigned here. As I said, they are kind of like the ones who give the fate to the child. And then Dola is the one who stays with you your entire life. That's the difference. So yeah, that's the majors. And then when it comes to the minors, I have to say that these, I don't think these are in any way directly portraying any Slavic myths or fairy tales. Maybe I am wrong, but for me these are like just nice fashion show of, you know, Slavic garments, Slavic traditional clothing basically, which I love either way because it's fucking stunning, I think. So first we have wheels instead of pentacles, which I am not familiar with the concept of the wheel as, you know, some karmic stuff in Slavic mythos per se, but that's how it was portrayed in the guidebook. So I'm not sure what that is about, to be honest. I love that she has a rooster, that's so Slavic. Yeah, really nice. Then we have the court cards, which, you know, I like how they are color coordinated, and like the best fashion is here. The queens are just so beautiful. Then we have the wands, and I mentioned this guy. I think that's Rarug, which is the fiery bird that Swaróg possesses, I guess. Yeah, and these are like just everyday scenes from everyday life of, you know, ordinary folk. And then we have like some kind of, I guess, royalty with the courts. This Queen of Wands is just... I want this dress. Then Ace of Cups. The cups are just beautiful. I love this one. And this one. These are my two faves, I think. Really pretty. And this guy is just like so happy because I have 9 fucking cups full of wine to drink. Can't blame him. Yeah, and then cards again. These are like kind of edgy with the black hair and everything. And the swords. This snake could be a depiction of Żmii, which is this mythological creature, kind of like Rarug, the bird that you saw earlier. But he's, you know, sometimes thought of as another version of Veles, that Veles can shapeshift into this Żmii. And, you know, he's the snake who fights with Perun in some versions of the myths. You know, it's like this classical underground god versus the heavenly god, which usually are brothers fighting against each other to, you know, bring some kind of balance around, I guess. And the chords again. I like this one very much. And this one as well. I love the clothing. And the colors in this one too. And I do love that they are both so, you know, warrior-like. Really like that. So yeah, that's a deck. Yeah. So as I said, they are a bit longer, so I can't really like grip the whole deck like this. Only like half of it at once. And it's kind of difficult for me to riffle shuffle, so I'm not even going to attempt that right now, because I don't want it to go all over the place. And then the other deck that I was talking about is called Rezyroda. You can buy it from some kind of Russian online shop. So yeah, that's my walkthrough of the deck. As I said, I think only the majors actually have some kind of like mythological characters in them. The minors not so much. But I do really like the art. Just when it comes to these titles, I'm not a fan of them. I would prefer if they stuck with the original ones that Mila Losenko created, because they were like calligraphy made of watercolors in this font that is kind of like Russian or Slavic. It looked really good, but they changed it to this boring, and I don't like the white, you know, the white bottom. It's really like, kind of bothers me, honestly. But yeah, I know it's not a huge issue. I'm happy that it's borderless and all of that. It's a really nice deck, just, you know, nitpicking some stuff. So anyway, I think that's it. And again, if you guys would like to add your own interpretations, you know something that I didn't mention here, or maybe you know a different version of something, or something suits better for you, please let me know in the comments. I'm always super curious to, you know, learn more. about this stuff and learn more about how other Slavs from like other regions of Slavland see this stuff. So yeah, thanks for watching and see you guys soon. Bye bye.